Spider-Man 2, one of the most anticipated games of the year. Some say it's a Game of the Year candidate, but I don't think so. There's a stacked lineup in 2023, and I think it falls far short of that goal. Even if it didn't have to compete against other great games such as Baldur's Gate or Zelda, I don't even think it belongs in the conversation. It's really not that good of a game, to be honest. Spider-Man 2 is honestly just not a good game. It's made well enough, but has a few major flaws that I believe really ruin the experience as a whole. That's not to say it isn't fun or it doesn't do some things very well, but the flaws in the game are easily preventable and quite honestly just a disappointment from what they could have done. Especially with the baseline they had with Spider-Man 1, that game was phenomenal, and I think they could have stepped up their game instead of just flatlining. First, I don't want this video to be all negative, so I'll start with what the game does well. For one, the graphics are pretty good, especially in the game. They might be lacking a little bit for today's standard during the cutscenes, but in-game they are phenomenal. During the cutscenes, however, they do struggle a bit with the uncanny valley, and something doesn't look quite right with the way the characters move and jump around. But the thing the game does do the best, I think, is the web swinging mechanics. These are just a joy to use and make the game as a whole so much better. Rarely do I even want to use the fast travel system or even know that it's there, because this movement system is so much fun. Not only the fact that it's so fun, but this leads you to all the side content in the game. Typically, the side content is what drives a player not to want to fast travel, but in this game it's the opposite. Players want to move around the city web swinging, which leads them to the side content. Take a game like Skyrim, however, where you want to walk around so you can find the side content, but the travel is not exactly entertaining. I think more games could learn from this and actually should take over and take this idea to heart. Another thing this game does great is the technology. The tech in this game is impressive. The fast swap between characters is so hard to even believe is possible, and it's so quick, it's honestly insane. The performance is also very good, never had frame issues or stutters the entire time I played. The game may not be that great for reasons I will explain in a moment, but that doesn't mean it isn't an enjoyment to play. It had some major flaws that left me wanting more and disappointed it wasn't better, but it was still a fun game. Just because it isn't a good game doesn't mean that it's necessarily not fun either. For example, my favorite Star Wars movie is The Phantom Menace. I recognize it's not a great movie, and it's probably not that good of a movie as a whole, but I love it. It's my favorite one. Can't explain it, it just is. I have a feeling a lot of people feel the same way about this game. They might recognize its flaws, but still love the game, and that is totally okay. Now, to get into the flaws of the game. First, we have the story. The story of the game is only alright. Whether it's by nature of being a superhero game, or whether it's some other reason, it is very, very predictable. You can blame that on whatever you want. You can say that's not fair because it's a superhero game and you know obviously Harry Osborn is going to be Venom or whatnot, but I still think it's a fair criticism. I shouldn't be able to tell exactly what's going to happen, especially the non-traditional comic beats. You just kind of know how the game's going to go, and it's not really not really that inventive in how it does things. Second, the story just seemed too short. I didn't feel it fleshed out the characters enough to have the payoffs that it did. It also assumed you played both the Spider-Man games, which is almost to a fault. The problem isn't necessarily that, but the problem is that the Miles Morales game is kind of a side game, and it does assume you played that game, and I think that's not necessarily a good thing. Not to mention these games were a number of years ago, and I don't even remember some of the details, and I'm typically pretty good at remembering it, so maybe they just didn't even include things, but it felt like some characters I had no idea who they even were. And when you pay $70 for a game, you want it to be long, and this game just couldn't do that. It's just not fair when there's games like Baldur's Gate that's out there for 100, 200 hours of game time, and this one's only 20, and you're paying the same amount. It's just not right. The second major issue I had with the game were the bugs. I'm usually pretty bug averse and don't really care too much, but a couple that I ran into were quite game breaking. I ran into this bug twice where an enemy that I was fighting was in a place that I was unable to reach. That led me to having to have a soft lock where I either had to restart the game or glitch him out of that spot, and one time it took me 15 minutes to get him out of this glitch. It was really frustrating, and I hate when this happens, especially because it's the end of the fight when this happens and you notice it. It's not towards the beginning, and you have to restart a whole lot of progress. It really kills your immersion and kills your experience as a whole. This happened to me both pre and post patch as well, so it's quite frankly inexcusable, and I don't know what they were doing with this. The other glitch I had to do with the voices not matching up to the character models, which I guess is excusable, but I still don't enjoy it, and it obviously could have been my software, but I don't think that's the case, and it's just really obnoxious. It's not the end of the world, but I didn't like it. But the first glitch was a major problem, and I hate when that happens. The third major issue with the game was that it didn't have enough Spider-Man. It seemed like forever until I was able to actually free roam the city with Spider-Man, and for a game that didn't really need a tutorial, it just had a really long one. Not to mention, throughout the game, it would throw a Mary Jane section in, or a random minigame or something like that, and it's just like, I just want to play Spider-Man. Why are you giving me these random characters? Just give me Spider-Man. And that's what you play this game for. You don't play it for Mary Jane, you play it for Spider-Man. And I know some people enjoy those, but I just don't. I don't want it in there. I just want to play Spider-Man, and they're using resources to make those levels. That just makes the rest of the game suffer, and I'll get into that in a bit. Another hot take of mine is that I'm not a huge fan of the two Spider-Man system. I know some people love it, but I don't think it works that well, simply because I think everyone will have a favorite Spider-Man that they'll naturally try to use. At least I did. Whether it's Miles or Peter, it doesn't really matter, but when you get forced to use the other one, it kind of takes you out of it, and you don't really like it. It's kind of frustrating almost. At least for me it was. I know not everyone will have this opinion, but that's just something I noticed, and it's worth mentioning, I think. And it also made you split your experience points, which didn't seem fair because I would play as, say, Peter Parker for 80% of the game. Why would I put any points into Miles? And the Miles feels weak, which makes me not want to use him more, and so on and so on. It just could have been done better, I think. Especially when it takes time away to use Mary Jane in the mini games. It's just, there's no left time over for the main Spider-Man. Another major flaw with this game was the pacing of the game as a whole. The beginning felt like it was dragging on, trying to get through the tutorial. And then there was the great Spider-Man game that I knew from the first one, and then all of a sudden at the end, it was just boss fight after boss fight. It was almost like 3 separate games in one, and it was a really weird pacing breakup. I really didn't like all the boss fights at the end, but the whole first half of the game felt like an Arkham game, like Batman Arkham Knight or something like that, which I loved. That's my favorite part of the game. And then the second half was like Elden Ring, obviously not with the difficulty, but with like the style of boss fight, couple little guys, boss fight, couple little guys. It was just weird because there was no bosses in the first half, and there's like boss after boss after boss after boss in the second half, and it just, the pacing was off on it. I don't know, it just didn't do it for me. The other part that I couldn't stand were the wall crawling sequences and the cinematics. The cinematics were kind of cool, but the wall crawling just drove me nuts. Like, why am I crawling through a particle accelerator in circles? It's just stupid. Like, why is this even a thing? And it's just like walk 3 steps, R2L2, jump up to spot. And I did it like 6 times. I'm like, okay, I can get doing this once or twice to like load in something, but it just kept going and dragging on. It's like, what is going on with this? Let me fight something. Let me swing. Why am I just walking in a line, essentially? It's almost like when you do the slow-mo walk follow missions. It's the same kind of vibe. It just doesn't work. And the cinematics are cool and all, but I feel like I just much more enjoy actually fighting the boss. But I guess sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The execution was decent on him. I don't have a huge problem with those. Another major problem I had with the game was the actual gameplay itself, and I could definitely tell the devs spent way too much time on the other stupid mini-games and the Mary Jane missions and all that garbage than they actually did on the Spider-Man combat, and it showed. The combat is incredibly repetitive, and the the animations, they're so repetitive, it's just not good. It could have been so much better, and it didn't feel like an improvement from the last game. If anything, it felt like a step back. It's the same finishing move over and over and over again. Even in the boss fights, it's like, oh cool, a cool boss finishing animation, but I did it 6 times exactly the same in the same boss fight, especially in that lizard fight. When you're trying to get him off the wall, it's like the same animation. The first time it was cool, the second time was alright, but by the 3rd, 4th, 5th, it's just tedious. And you leave the fight feeling like it was a waste of time with those animations rather than enjoying them for what they are. Not to mention, most of the combat's just spamming dodge and attack until a special is charged, and then you just spam all 4 attacks in a row because it kind of makes you invincible, and it's just kind of a weird system, and it's not a great gameplay loop. It's decently fun sometimes, but other times it just feels like a drag. The other thing that really bothered me were the attack warnings were kind of muddled, and it wasn't really clear if it was a parry or a dodge or a jump. Like, obviously it was color-coded, but they didn't use them enough where you would really remember what was what. It was like the little enemies never used it, and then all of a sudden you'd have somebody who did, and you're like, oh, I don't remember what this is, and then he'd smack you pretty hard for some good damage. And it was just kind of weird. It was like, I don't get these color combinations. They just don't work right in my mind. Something was off on them, and I just couldn't get a flow for it. There's just not enough of them or what. But either way, it just didn't really work for me. And then obviously the lack of a parry button, or maybe there was, but I didn't really use it. Like in the Batman Arkham games, it was really fun to parry things. You get some cool animations. You didn't really get that in this game. And it was kind of a bummer. It was the same parry animation every time, and it was just kind of a big burst attack. It wasn't even really a parry attack. It was like a stun almost. It was just kind of weird that they lacked it. And they got rid of some of the best content, which is the stealth missions. I don't know why they got rid of that. That was so fun in the first game, and they got rid of it. It was actually probably part of my favorite part of the game, and it's just really not in this one. And I think what hurts the most is that they have the blueprint to do it. The Arkham games are just this system, but better, I think. A little more fleshed out. It's not quite as repetitive. And even in the first game, they had it there. I don't know why they didn't add animations. They must have just wasted so much time on these mini games and this other stuff that they just didn't have time to actually come up with some new animations for finisher moves. And it's just really a shame because this game could have been so much better, and it just had so much left on the table. And the more you play it, the more and more you notice that it just doesn't have variety. And the last major issue I have is the lack of endgame content. There's just none at all. There's really no incentive to come back and play after you beat the main story, and I don't know why you would even bother. The little missions that you do to fight the Sandman minions aren't even that fun. It's like, I already beat Sandman, why am I fighting him again? I already beat the symbiotes, why are they still here? They just don't really fit in the universe, and it's like, oh, I'll just web swing around until I find one and then beat it, and it's really easy, and it's just kind of a waste of time. And you're just doing it to get money to get the suits, which only like 3 of them look cool anyways, so what's the point? I don't know, it just didn't really do it for me. Not to mention, they didn't even have the decency to add a New Game Plus mode. They have no endgame and no endgame plus, and it's just like, wow, 20 hours and then I'm done. It's kind of a disappointment. Even the collectibles, they just aren't that fun to go find. They aren't that fun to do, and it's just, I don't know, it's just lacking in general. But overall, Spider-Man 2, it was pretty fun. It's very flawed, and I think it definitely could have been better, and I think that's what I'm most upset about. It's not that it was a bad game inherently. It's just, it had the blueprint and it could have done so well. It just was lacking, and they just did not spend their time and energy in the right things, and it's just such a disappointment that it wasn't better. It was barely even an improvement over the first game. However, the universe does have hope. It does have a good storyline. I did enjoy the storyline. It just could have been a little better. And I think the next couple games could definitely be really good. I look forward to what they have to do with this game. And like I said, with the Phantom Menace reference, I definitely understand why someone would like it, and I enjoyed it. I just don't think it's that good of a game, and those things don't have to necessarily coincide. You can have a bad game that's a lot of fun. It happens all the time, actually, if you really think about it. Good games aren't even fun sometimes. I mean, just think of all the movies that win Grammys or Oscars, whatever the heck it is. Like, nobody actually watches those. Those are not really good movies. Everyone enjoys the silly movies that aren't actually that good from an objective standpoint, but they just, I don't know, this one, it just could have been better, and it's a little disappointing at best. But overall, I still enjoyed it, and I understand why some people do. Leave a comment and let me know what you guys think. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what you guys thought about the video, what you thought about this game, and if you had any other comments. And just as a side question, what do you guys think about all these games that are launching broken? Is it just me, or are things launching really broken lately, and it's like it takes a week and then they're fixed? Why don't they just fix it delayed a week? I don't even know. I don't remember this happening 10 years ago, but it just seems like it. I don't know. What do you guys think? Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Peace out.